Everyone likes things like horoscopes, personality tests, political compass tests, all those different kind of things. But what if something like that was used and applied to specifically love? Hey everyone, my name's Christian Verstappen, and I have a lot to say about many things. I want to talk about the five love languages. And specifically, over a year ago, I came across this video by the content creator Big Joel. Um, Big Joel, I like a fair amount of his work. I like a decent amount of his videos and things of that nature. But when he did this video, I honestly don't remember specifically what he talked about, but I do know that many of the things he did talk about, I found myself, wanting to throw my 2 cents in. I've been wanting to go over this video for a while. Is basically what I'm getting at. I've had it saved in the chamber, as it were, for a good while because I wanted to wait for Valentine's Day because for those of you that don't know, I do like to do special videos for special days if I can do one for that special day. Hence the pink background. Hope you enjoy it. But without further ado, let's get into love languages, a psychological horror. Now, of course, this is originally by Big Joel, and if you want to see the full video, well, I mean, we are going to go through the full video, but you know, give him some love, even if I end up disagreeing with the guy, because I do actually generally like Big Joel and his content and anything. Anyway, let's get into it here.
The Christian minister, life coach, and radio personality, released the book The Five Love Languages. The basic claim made by the book is that there are five primary love languages: acts of service, quality time, physical touch, words of affirmation, and gift giving. The vast majority of us have one dominant love language, one way that we feel and communicate love, and a good way to make our marriages happier is to learn and practice the love language of our partner. Since its release, the claims made by this book have taken on a life of their own. There are TikToks about the love languages, YouTube videos, online quizzes, card games you can play. It is a cultural phenomenon. And if I wanted to, I could come up with a few problems with this book and with the arguments it describes. For one thing, Chapman presents these languages as five separate ways that people can love. They're independent from one another. You being receptive to any one language doesn't make you receptive to any other. My love language is acts of service, but not gift giving. My love language is physical touch, but not words of affirmation. But this model seems to ignore that for the vast majority of people, these love languages build on each other. For example, the amount of physical touch you get from your partner is going to be highly correlated with the amount of quality time you spend with them. The same is true of words of affirmation, right? Sure, there are ways to get that without quality time, but it doesn't hurt your chances. If a couple has an intimate date night twice a week, they are a lot more likely to say nice stuff to each other. In fact, for most people, I'd say that quality time is not just one expression of love, it is its essential foundation. Wanting to spend
Sure. So I'm gonna stop him here because he's just like gonna kind of keep talking. I wanted to give him a minute for him to like stop so I could. But anyway, um, so I do want to kind of touch on that briefly. The concept of the five love languages being um, words of affirmation, quality time, acts of service, physical touch, and gift giving. Those are the five love languages. My order is actually specifically words of affirmation, then physical touch, physical connection, all that stuff. Which is not words of affirmation is essentially like you know it's compliments, but it's just like it's you know communicating your love to somebody else through words. Um, I am somebody who very much, and a lot of people I find that have these love languages and the order they have them or whatever, the order that you give love is the same, or this order is not only the order that you like to receive love, but also the order that you give love. So I'm very like, as you know, I talk a lot. I talk a lot in relationships as well, and I talk a lot and communicate a lot of my love through my feelings for my partner through words. I'm very much that kind of person. I am also, I've talked many times before about how I'm very emotionally and sexually driven. So I'm very much in tune both with myself and my partner on a physical level. But it's not only just sexual connection, it's hand holding, it's hugging, it's cuddling, it's gentle caresses, it's all these little things. all this stuff. Just being in the presence. That's quality time. That's my third one. Um, and quality time is all about, well, quality time, just spending time enjoying each other's company, things of that nature. This isn't only true for romantic relationships, but this is how I am in relationships with other people, like just in general. I have always been somebody where it's more important to me who I'm with rather than what I'm doing. Now, of course, there are levels to stuff, right? There are levels where it doesn't matter who I'm with, I wouldn't want to do the thing. Or even if I don't, well, actually, no, I've never really had it where if I don't enjoy the person, I can still enjoy the thing. That's not really a thing that I've had. But yeah. And then acts of service is where it's like you do something nice for somebody else, right? Maybe it's something simple like um, I don't know, you knew your you know I don't know, you like did like okay, if we're talking like around the house, it could be simple things like you know maybe I don't know, maybe you and your partner have something where it's like okay, you do the dishes and I take out the trash or something, and then you realize that they're like you're like, you know what, I'm just going to do the dishes and take out the trash because why not? Like that can be an example of acts of service. It's just like doing kind things for somebody else. That's my fourth, and then my fifth is the what is it called? Gift giving. I'm not really good at giving gifts, and I'm not I will accept a gift if somebody gives me something. It's kind, it's great, it's like cool, that's nice. But for me, all of the other things are much more important. And the thing with love languages is, and this is me personally, right? With those, like yours can be any order or what have you, right? But the thing with these love languages is it's one of those things where, like any of these, like the personality tests or any of that, it is meant to be or it should be taken with a grain of salt. But it's something to understand where you say like okay, this is how I give and receive love, like generally speaking. But also it's not to say that like with me for example, just because acts of service is my highest does not necessarily mean that that is always the thing that I would want. Looking at these in a way of saying like okay, well, whatever your highest one is, like that's all I said acts of service, I meant words of affirmation. Words of affirmation is my highest, is not necessarily, that doesn't mean that that's always what I want. um or what will always make me feel loved, because like if I have like support in something, which is great, that's a big thing for acts of or words of affirmation. If I'm getting support from a loved one, that's fantastic, that's great. But it's not just if I'm just getting support, like, oh, you can do it, and it's like great, like, and kind of like that encouragement and everything. But there, I'm at a place where like I could use a little bit of help. That little bit of help is going to go even further than just the words of affirmation. So the important thing to know with these is it's not just like one or the other or any of those things. You know what I mean? So yeah, but I do think if you look at it that way, because Joel's right, like they compound on each other, and I would agree with that. But I don't think that the way that words of affirm or that love languages are supposed to work, so to speak, is against this concept. Now, to be fair, I never read the book. I've just done the test and I've talked about it with people, like the concept. I'm familiar with the concept of words of affirmation. I've never read the book or anything. I don't know Gary Chapman personally. I know he was a relatively, a lot of people in the Christian community I grew up in would talk about him, and some people would like kind of live or die by words of affirmation. Others would just treat it more as it's kind of meant to be, and I think that's how I and more level-headed people looked at it. But I know my dad and his wife both have the same order of their love languages, and they're doing very well together. So maybe there's something to it.
Time with your spouse enables the relationship to exist and have meaning. These aren't just unrelated variables, different languages. They fundamentally connect. Another gripe I have is that it's unclear why these in particular are supposed to be the 5 elemental love languages. When I think about what makes me feel loved, a huge aspect of that is joking, laughing, and making someone else laugh. Booby, 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 booby. If I was writing a list of my love languages, that would certainly be on it. And of course, you could think that of lots of things. Maybe your love language has to do
but that would be, I would say that would be probably in line with quality time and stuff like that. You're spending time making each other laugh, making like enjoying each other's company. That would be part of quality time.
getting along with your friends. Maybe your love language is trust and freedom, a partner who is fine with you having your own life, doing what you want to do. And what makes any of these less legitimate a love language than giving gifts is? I mean, I give and receive presents maybe...
Nothing. None of them make any of them less relevant. It's all about how you personally receive and give the love back.
Twice a year, and that seems true for most people I know. My point here is simply that love takes a lot of forms, and Chapman seems to just choose some love-associated words and call it a day. It doesn't really seem like the 5 categories of love to me. It isn't just Chapman's use of the love languages that I find worthy of interrogation, though. It's also the concept itself, the idea of a love language. Obviously, Chapman does not literally believe that quality time is a language. You know, it's a metaphor, but metaphor shapes feelings, shapes the way we interpret stories and events. And in the case of this book, I'm not sure its central metaphor does its subject justice. Very often in this book, Chapman will take the concept of love as language very seriously, say that learning to listen may be as difficult as learning another language, or that the emotional love language you and your partner speak may be as different as English and Chinese. And
no, that's true though, because okay, so like I'm going to speak from experience here, but like I was in a relationship where we had very different love languages. I cannot stress this enough. For me personally, words of affirmation, communicating love through words is not just a want, it is a need. I need to give love in a way that is communicating my like communicating through words, and I need my partner to be able to express to me like why they love me, what they love about me, what they love about us, how they feel about our relationship in words. I had a girlfriend who was very much, she would say like, oh well, actions speak louder than words, and that's true, that's great, that's yeah, but there are people like myself who need those words too. Now on the flip side of that, I struggled as well with understanding her love language and understanding that she was very big on quality time. Now, of course, I am too, but quality time was like her highest, and some of the ones that were higher for me were lower. And I'm not saying like we didn't work out because we didn't, but we didn't. Neither of us really made that much of an effort to understand each other's love language. Whenever we would, because really what it comes down to, right, when we talk about love languages, is ways of communicating love and all that stuff. I mean, I briefly mentioned it before, but like we just like weren't compatible intimately, emotionally or sexually, unfortunately, either of them. And it was sad, but you know, no one hurt anybody or anything, you know, but we weren't communicating with each other's, we weren't understanding each other properly. And when we would have discussions about our relationship, we would ultimately, it would be a lot of like, okay, this is how I feel like, and I didn't know that we were taught we were communicating love languages, but you know, I would say things like, you know, this is kind of the way that I, you know, feel loved by you and the way that I give love to, you know, kind of thing, right? And she'd be like, well, that's just not what I do, you know, that's just like not how I am. And I'm like, can you try? You know what I mean? Like can you try? Like you try and I'll try, you know, to do what works for you. And you know, that was kind of an issue we would have, is that there was kind of a thing where like, and again, like I wasn't perfect. There were many things that I failed to kind of, you know, communicate properly or like do on her end properly or stuff like that. And yeah, like my thing was more so like I couldn't understand how she wasn't as like verbal and physical as I was, which again, not just sexual, but like hand holding, cuddling, like all that stuff. Like I'm somebody that I always want to like kind of be like touching or cuddling or whatever my partner in some way. And I mean, not literally always, but the vast majority of the time. I've always said like, whenever I've been single, as I currently am, that like I miss just little things like holding hands while like walking into like the store together to like run do chores and like do grocery shopping and shit. Like you miss those little things when you don't have a relationship. I miss like, you know, just like having like my girlfriend like sit on my lap or you know, whatever, when like watching a movie or something, or I don't, just like little, you know, just like little cuddly, like just sweet moments, you know what I mean? Yeah, I don't know, it's just it's sweet, but like, so those are the ways that I communicate, and she didn't. And the whole point of understanding this concept of love languages is to be like, okay, understand how you communicate and how your partner communicates, and figure out how you can speak each other's language. And yes, it can be as difficult, because if you have somebody like me who, like, these are the ways if I could never be with somebody who was extremely materialistic. No, like, there's nothing wrong if you are somebody who is more materialistic. In fact, if you can own that, like, that's awesome, because wanting the desire for physical things, material items, is kind of like, not demonized, but like, people are kind of made to like feel bad about being that way, and I don't think that's right. But I personally could not be with somebody who was like that. If I was with somebody who like always had to go to like do these fancy events and always had to have like these physical items bought for them and stuff, like, I couldn't do that. I'd be like, for one, like, and especially if that was the way she showed love to me, I'd be like, I'm not feeling it. Like, it doesn't, it doesn't do anything for me. But again, it depends on how you are personally, and none of these are any worse or better or anything than anyone. Your highest, again, it could be gifts, could be acts of service, could be anything. You could be the complete opposite of me, where you could be somebody could tell you how much they love you and go into like extreme detail, extremely like romantic or I don't know, erotic, if that's the kind of conversation you're having, whatever the case, extreme detail about how they feel about you. But if they don't give you things to symbolize that love, maybe to you just don't feel it. And that's fine. That doesn't make you a bad person or anything. That just means you communicate love in a different way. And that's the whole point of this concept of love languages, is learning how to communicate your love language in the same way that your partner understands, and vice versa.
Just super weird to read. I understand this might be true of some people. There are individuals who very well might absolutely not understand their partner's desires. But is this really the case for a sizable number of couples? English and Chinese...
Yes. I very much believe, yes, 100%. Are you kidding with how many people there are that, like, especially boomers? Like, I mean, if we think about how common of how common the joke of like, oh, I hate my wife, like, that's the punchline for so much like boomer humor. Yes, especially in older couples, 100%. It's extremely common to not understand your partner's love language. Yeah, absolutely. I would argue it's probably the most common reason that relationships don't work out.
Are mutually incomprehensible, and to make the claim that your love language, your desire to spend quality time with your partner, or to have
what I mean to say by that is, it's the most common reason a relationship doesn't work out, is what I mean to say.
Say nice stuff to you might plausibly be completely incoherent to the person you love. Both seems unrealistic and frankly depressing. To me, this feels like Chapman overstating his own case.
Not. Okay, but Joel, it's not that it's incoherent. It's not. I think using it as a language of, say, like Chinese or something is actually a good example, or you could say Spanish or French or whatever. But I think that's a good example, because oftentimes, you've probably noticed this, where like you could have not have a conversation, but like briefly talk to somebody who is speaking a different language, and because of like the way that they're like moving and their expressions on their face, you kind of get the vibe of what they're going for, but you don't really know what they're actually saying. You can't really understand them. So it's kind of the same thing, where it's like, yeah, you could have somebody who my love language wouldn't work with them at all, where like you could tell them how much you love them until you're blue in the face, and unless you like get them something or do something for them, they just don't feel it. Again, there's nothing wrong with that, but the whole point is learning to understand that concept and how to work with it.
Making the love languages out to be this impossibly huge concept so that people will take his work to be more insightful and important. And really, that's a problem with the book as a whole, a problem with most self-help books, if I'm being honest. These kinds of books often trade in the idea of the big secret. Chapman is bringing us this new, formerly unknown information about love and marriage, and as he says, the reader acquiring this information will... It's not like a new, unknown way. It's more like a way of understanding, categorizing, and simplifying what you already know on some level intuitively to be true. Like, you have issues where you're like, man, it just doesn't feel like she loves me. It just doesn't feel like he loves me. You know, they say they do, but I'm just not feeling it. Okay. That's what this is. That's exactly what this is about. help save their marriage. But, it can't do
Or
that.
have you ever heard if you've ever heard people say like, I know they love me, I just don't feel it. You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
It could never do that. Let me tell you about one passage of this book. Chapman is talking to a guy about his unhappy marriage, and he suggests that his wife's love language is quality time and that she isn't getting enough of it. The guy responds, Dr. Chapman, that is what she's always complained about. I didn't do things with her. I didn't spend any time with her. That's her love language, all right, no question about it. But Dr. Chapman, what am I going to do? My job is so demanding. And Chapman basically just responds, do it. Spend time with her. Quote, where will you find the time? You will make it. You're a wise man. You can see the issue here, right? Chapman has added nothing to this man's life. It's true that communicating with your partner about their desires is good, and saying that can be helpful, but it's just not some kind of relationship panacea. This guy
No, I think that what he's getting at there is the reality that you make time for things that you care about. Like you do. Whenever people tell you, especially like, in a relationship or even a friendship, anything like that, and they tell you like, oh, I don't have time, that's not entirely true. They might have other things in their schedule that conflict with that and would make that time more difficult to manage. But if somebody really cares about you, they generally will make time for you. If they care about you or anything else, like they will make time. Now, look, if you're literally working like, I don't know, there's 24 hours in a day. If you're working like, I don't know, 12 plus hours a day, 13, like whatever, something like, if you're literally like doing nothing except working and sleeping, that's a huge problem. And like, I really feel for you. If you're in that situation, but most people, which is, who the book is meant to apply to, that's not going to be the case. So the reality, it's that whole thing where it's like, yeah, no, you will make time for the things and people you care about. That's how it is.
knows what his wife wants. The problem in this relationship, the one that is orders of magnitude more difficult to solve, is actually giving it to her when he's sleepy. And that's the problem that Chapman just dismisses out of hand. Finally, I just want to say that I don't like the vibes of this book. I don't trust Michael Chapman. I think
Wait. Oh, Michael Chapman, not Gary. Oh, it is Gary. Okay, yeah. Wait. No, so that's like, now, of course, it's different if you and your partner have like, different sleep schedules and stuff. I've had that issue before too. But like, you find ways to work around it if you can. I mean, if the relationship isn't salvageable, then it isn't. But generally speaking, you find ways to work around this stuff. And it's like, if you are so like, okay, I have a friend who is kind of in this boat himself, where like he works a lot. He's and his girlfriend, the biggest issue he has with her, and he's had with many girls that he's dated, is giving her the time that she needs, giving her his time and energy and all that stuff. And the thing is, what he has to do ultimately is schedule that time. That's what you got to do. Schedule time, schedule date night, schedule like, especially if you're like living with somebody else, and if you're actually working all the time and you can't spare like a second, you can't spare like any time to actually spend with your partner. I mean, are they working as well? Like, what's happening here? And again, like if you have, but like, I have another friend who, he works a 9-to-5 job like I do. He works in the office with me, and his wife is a night nurse, an overnight nurse, whatever they're called. That causes a lot of issue in scheduling for them, but they find time to make it work. The whole point of what Gary was telling that guy is make the time. Like don't give yourself that excuse of, oh, she wants all this time, like what do I do? Well, you make the time. That's what you do. Like she wants quality time, you give her quality time. That's it, you figure out how to make it work.
a weirdo. I can't convey this. I can't find you a quote and convey to you why I don't like the vibes of the book, but they are all off. They are all off. Every page I found myself just feeling weird about the vibes of the book. Maybe I'll talk some other time about these vibes, but for now I'll just say it. I'll just say that I don't like them. Anyway, I imagine I'm getting some comments right now explaining how and why I'm wrong about love languages. And while I'm sure I won't agree with those comments, let me just say this. If you like the love languages, I don't think you should care all that much about the problems I just raised. I think tarot is cool, pulling cards from a deck and learning what they say about your life. And I don't like it because I think the cards hold psychic power or because it's helpful in a clinical setting. I like it because it's fun, because it's an excuse to connect with your friends and loved ones, because no matter what card you get, there will always be some way to connect it to yourself. And love languages are, in my opinion, a bit like that. They enable some people to communicate their desires and feelings, and that is ultimately fine. No, my real problem with love languages doesn't concern any particular methodological problem the model has. Rather, my question for this book is much more broad and much more simple. Why does it exist? One of William Shakespeare's most famous...
What do you mean? it's it's a way of simplifying a complicated concept that a lot of people have in their relationships, which is not being able to communicate love in the right way to their partner. What do you mean? Why does it exist? It's like anything else. It's like a measurement and like a way to understand something. It is a language. It's like math. It's like anything. Like it, words mean what we want them to mean because they're meant to communicate a message. 2 plus 2 equals 4, not because there's actually a thing of two that actually makes four, but like we've created that language to understand that concept. Like that's how language works. That's the whole. What do you mean? Why does any language exist? What does that mean?
Famous and beloved sonnets is Sonnet 116, and let me read it to you now. Let me not, to the marriage of true minds, admit impediments. Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth's unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. If this be error, and upon me proved, I never writ, no man ever loved. So this poem is about Shakespeare establishing the permanence of love. Love doesn't change or go away, it is an ever-fixed mark. Very simple. I think what's so appealing
Right,
about—
no, that's fair. What a lot of people talk about when they talk about love is they talk about like infatuation and limerence, which are good and great, things to have, especially at the start of a relationship. And you can maintain those things and keep those going throughout like your relationship as you go on. And I think you should in order to keep your relationship fiery, if you want to call it that. But like passionate, everything. Yeah, but I mean it is, but it is true that like I like the term. I think it's a John Mayer song, which is "love is a verb," and I really like that concept because you choose, like every day that you wake up, every day you're with your partner, every day, like whatever it is, you choose to love your partner all over again, essentially. And that's why things like scheduled dates and like ritualistic activities and all these different things are good because it can help you maintain that love and that passion for your partner. So I'm not quite sure what Joel's getting at here, but I probably agree with this part. We'll see.
About this poem, though, is the really odd way that Shakespeare approaches that thesis, the way he argues his point. Look at lines 2 through 4. Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. These are my favorite in the whole poem because they give the impression that Shakespeare is fundamentally uninterested in fucking around, that he's playing here a very important and precise kind of game. What is it that might alter love, that might remove it? Well, Shakespeare could have given examples here: death, or cheating, or simmering resentment. He could have written a lot of things. He was a smart guy. But to do that would be to allow into the sonnet ambiguity, double meaning, slippage, difficult interpretations. These are the things we associate so strongly with poetry, with Shakespeare, and yet he gives them no voice. What tries to alter things? Well, here's definitely a correct answer to that question. Alteration does. What tries to remove stuff? I don't know. How about a remover? There's a powerful sense that in this poem, all Shakespeare wants is precision, to be understood, that his logic must be as rigid and unchanging as the love that he describes.
Okay, I don't agree with this. This is getting into, and I could be misunderstanding Shakespeare's quote and how Joel is describing it, but what it sounds like to me is this idea of what's often referred to as unconditional love. Here's the reality about unconditional love. It's kind of dumb because the reality is all types of relationships, especially romantic ones, or honestly even ones that you have with your family, are conditional. I'm sorry, but like you have to think about if you're in a relationship, because the issue with this mentality of like love doesn't change, love doesn't da da da, is it kind of it's very easy to get into that mindset, and I've been in that mindset of basically where if you don't love somebody anymore, then you never loved them at all. Or if you're willing to leave or whatever, then it was never real. It's a very toxic mindset to put yourself in because you end up putting yourself in these situations where you say like, okay, well, I have to stay in this relationship because I love them and I know they love me too. And this is how people get into situations where like they will continually be cheated on or abused in some way, which I very much view infidelity as a form of emotional abuse. And things of that nature. Or they'll just simply not have their needs met in the relationship, but they'll stay because they love them and they think it's like the right thing to do or whatever. Again, I know I'm projecting a little bit here. I'll be open about that, but I know that's how I very much felt. And this quote from Shakespeare kind of feels like it's in that vein to me, where it's kind of this idea that like, oh, love doesn't change, love doesn't, all these different things. And it's like, no, people change. Like life happens, people change, people go through changes, and death can happen too. You can love somebody, they can pass away, and you can move on with your life. People lose their spouses and remarry. People, like, all these different things. If you can love your partner and they turn into a completely different person, where, yeah, I mean, the obvious thing is like they could cheat on you and leave you or something, but like, I mean, this is an extreme case, but they could become like some criminal mastermind or something, and you're like, I can't be with you anymore. You're not. How often have you heard the phrase of like, you're not the person I love anymore. You're not who I fell in love with. Like, that happens, and you can do things to try to maintain that love, which I think part of understanding love languages is helpful with that. But also, sometimes you got to know when to just walk away. And I feel like this quote from Shakespeare is kind of discouraging that, and how Joel is kind of describing this. But we'll let him continue here.
You can get this sense, too, from the abstraction of this poem. Sonnets are most often associated with love poems. Shakespeare isn't breaking the mold there, but normally, a love sonnet is about your feelings for someone. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun, etc. But this poem is addressed to nobody. It is not about any particular true minds or the marriage that they share. No, it is only about the concept of love at its broadest level. There is nothing romantic or flowery about what Shakespeare's doing here. It is a work of philosophy, an essay. Finally, we have the last lines, the icing on the cake of this odd sonnet. If this be error and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved. We might expect the end of a poem to give us something, well, poetic, but instead, Shakespeare uses this time simply to reaffirm his own correctness, and do so with a dry if-then statement. If I'm wrong, then nobody's loved. Shakespeare is making an argument, presenting you with a case, and he needs you to understand in the most direct way possible that this argument has concrete stakes, that it means something, that he's right. But here's the problem, none of this logic actually holds up. In fact, the poem is tearing apart...
Oh, okay, okay.
It seems. Let me tell you about two passages in this love language book. The first is in the Giving Gifts chapter, where Chapman shares an anecdote about one of his clients. This guy, we'll call him Turnip, lost his mother, and his wife's frankly evil boss told her that while she could take off a few hours for the funeral, she needed to be back at work for the afternoon shift. But his wife said, no, even if you do fire me, my husband needs me today. And this is how Chapman describes it. That wife had spoken the love language of her husband, and he never forgot it. The idea being that she gave him the gift of her presence, which is, I guess, his love language. Isn't that just like super weird? Like, no, this woman did not speak her husband's love language. That's such a needless way to describe it. This funeral was presumably one of the most important and saddest days in Turnip's life, and by turning down her boss, his wife showed him how much she cared about him, how much she was there for.
That is speaking his love language. Yes, what you're describing is speaking his love language.
Him. We all already know that that is a loving thing to do. And so Chapman's line about how actually Turnip's love language is gift giving only serves to confuse the point. Most of us
Okay, here's the thing, right? It's not... This is correct. What he's getting at here, where like kind of the words of how like love languages are labeled is true. Like, I don't know if I'd necessarily call that gift giving, but the point of gift give, I would say that's probably more so active service. But the point of gift giving is you are giving up something from yourself to another. It's sacrifice. It's you sacrificed, you potentially, or you did in this case, sacrifice your job for me. Like, think about when you have you have that very common thing in like rom-coms and sitcoms and all that stuff, right? Where it's like, oh, I didn't get on the plane and take the job. I think that's like how Friends ends, isn't it? Where it's like, Rachel comes back and she's like, I didn't get on the plane. That it's a very common trope, right? For someone to have this like big thing, all their dreams are going to come true, and then they decide at the very end, I'm not going to take it because you're more important to me than that. That is a very impactful thing, and that is, I wouldn't necessarily say it's gift giving like physical gifts, but it's an act of sacrifice. And yes, that is a very powerful, important thing to have in a relationship. If you have somebody where it's like, oh, I was going to do this one thing, but I'm going to do this instead for you. Or especially if it's something where it's like, I have this job, but they weren't going to let me leave, and I know you needed me to be here with you today as you're grieving through this loss of a loved one. I gave this up for you, So, yeah. Also understand that, let's be honest, this was written in a time and for a demographic that is, let's be honest here, privileged economically and otherwise. So Gary is very much, I would imagine, thinking of it in that mindset. Now, granted, there are people plenty of people who you do something nice for somebody else. You make this sacrifice, you do this gift, you do whatever, and your partner gets mad because you spent money that that you didn't have or whatever it might be, right? And there's that side to it as well, right? Or like he could have been mad that what did you do? You quit your job. What are you talking about? How are we gonna afford the mortgage or the rent or whatever, you know? So I mean that kind of thing definitely happens too. But this is the point. It's about understanding yours and your partner's love language.
Our partners with us on days of mourning. That's kind of all there is to say. The second passage I want to read is way more strange, though. In the Discovering Your Primary Love Language chapter, Chapman talks about a guy, Bob, who doesn't know what his love language is, words of affirmation or physical touch. And I'll just read from the book. I said, let me ask you this. If Carol were meeting your sexual needs, that is, if you were having quality sexual intercourse as often as you desired, but she was giving you negative words, making critical remarks, sometimes putting you down in front of others, do you think you would feel loved by her? I don't think so, he replied. I think I would feel betrayed and deeply hurt. I think I would be depressed. Bob, I said, I think we have just discovered that your primary love language is words of affirmation. What on—
So, okay, so I can relate to that because, like I said, those are my two um, most important languages. And I mean, if I think about that even from my perspective, of if I was having my physical needs met, and not even just sexual, but primarily that, but my emotional, because that's really what it comes down to, at least for me, is like the emotional and sexual needs being met. If one is being met, like if sexual needs are being met, but the emotional needs are being met, or like my partner's like talking shit about me to other people, or in front of me or whatever, yeah, that would be fucked up. And then it would kind of feel like, well, then it would just feel like a toxic relationship. It would feel like one of those relationships where it's like, we don't have anything else going, but we're good in bed kind of thing. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's not healthy. But if we flipped it, I don't know. Would I be satisfied with just one but not the other? I don't think so. I think I guess it would depend how unsatisfied the sexual needs being met would be. But the thing is, this is my thing, and like in Bob's case, this is Bob's thing. This is like everybody's thing to figure out in and of themselves. My like big philosophy for life in general is there's not a one size fits all way to live life. We all have to find what works for us. You do, like, it's true with love languages, it's true with everything else. Just because and you might hear that story and think like, okay, well, I do more, like, I agree with Bob. I don't know if I necessarily say that means his love language above everything is words of affirmation. It might be, but like, nobody likes their partner talking shit about them. I don't know.
On earth are you talking about? You have not established Bob's love language. All you've made clear is that while Bob cares about sex, he wouldn't be happy with a partner who demeaned, insulted, and ridiculed him regularly. Based on this conversation, the only thing we know about Bob is that he is a normal person who doesn't like it when people are mean to him. So, looking at just these two examples, and to be clear, I could give more, you can start to see my major issue with this book. That more often than not, the love languages don't serve to clarify and explain human emotion. Rather, they just add more words. You were not happy because your partner came through on your mother's funeral. You were happy because your love language is gift-giving and she gave you the gift of her presence. You wouldn't be sad because your hypothetical partner insulted you a lot. You'd be sad because your love language is words of affirmation and she wouldn't be giving you any. It is a language that works to mystify.
So again, I think the issue with this is looking at it where it's like, this is higher than, and like, it can be, but okay, let me put it this way. So in my case, and probably in Bob's as well, just because words of affirmation is higher than physical connection or physical touch or whatever, or to put it, yeah. That doesn't mean that having one met but not, that doesn't mean that in this case that it would be good to have, I'm trying to figure out how to explain this properly. Okay, so the problem is, this is kind of looking at two extremes. So let's look at it this way, right? We'll look at Bob's perspective, in this situation, right? So basically, what it comes down to is like the two extremes are either you guys are having incredible sex as much as you want, it's great, like all the different stuff, but your partner is talking shit about you in front of other people. Or your partner's like such an incredible loving person to you verbally, all these different things, right? But your sex life is trash. The thing is, just because one thing is higher, like you care more, about words, or you care more about physical touch, whatever it is, doesn't mean that you don't want both. I think the better way to look at it is it's kind of more like both are good and both are important and both need to be there, but one is a higher priority. So it's like I think the better way to explain it is like I feel more love, more connection through the words. Like I feel it, and I need it in some way. I desire it strongly to have the physical connection as well, but the emotional verbal connection is also very high up there. And if only the physical connection is there, it's not great. If the verbal connection is there, it's still pretty good. Not as good as it would be with both, but it's still. So I think there's room for like many things, nuance and variance and all those different things with this. I don't think that looking at it where it's like, okay, if you look at somebody and or you look at yourself and you're like, oh, I don't understand. They're really nice to me. They always say nice things. Why am I not feeling their love? Well, because they're not meeting your other like ways that you need to be met love. I don't think looking at it, and I don't think it's Gary's intention either to look at it in a way where it's this kind of like you take like each plate away or whatever, where it's like, okay, so we'll use me for example, where it's like, okay, well, it doesn't matter if you get anything, or like I'm given anything, or sacrifices are made, or I've ever been helped out with anything, or like all these other different things, right? But hey, as long as those words are there, as long as they speak and say nice things, that's all that matters. No, that's not the way that it works. It's just that for somebody like myself and Bob in this case, that's the primary way that we feel love. It's like somebody who their highest thing is gift giving and gift getting. If you're just giving them gifts all the time, they're not going to feel love, but you're not meeting their needs, like, verbally, housework, like sharing the house chores and stuff like that, sexually, emotionally, like any of those different things, then they'll feel something, maybe they'll be like, oh, that's so nice that you got me this, but eventually they're going to be like, I mean, it's nice that you get me these things, but like, I don't really care. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. But I mean, I understand Joel's criticism, but I think that he's looking at it as if it's like kind of an all or nothing thing. And I don't think that's how love languages are supposed to work. That's not how I use them, at least, and that's not how I've ever heard people use them. But again, I've never read the book, so if this is actually how Gary goes about them, then yeah, that's not the best.
Love to make it seem foreign and inhuman. And I guess I have to ask, why? What is the difference between saying you're mad at your partner for not giving you a birthday gift and saying you're mad at them because your love language is gift giving and they didn't give you a birthday gift? What is Michael Chapman talking about when he talks about love
Gary, why does he keep saying Michael?
languages? I want you to imagine that you're getting married. The priest recites the oaths, does whatever priests do.
Wait, let's go back to that though.
Talking about when he talks about love languages. Love language is gift giving and they didn't give you a birthday gift. What is...
Because it doesn't matter how you phrase it. It's a way of understand. It's like, it's funny that he calls this did it say psychological or philosophical? A philosophical horror. It's not a philosophical thing, it's a psychological one. It's understanding how your brain works. Like, what difference does it make understanding oh, I'm upset, I don't know, I struggle with my confidence versus I have childhood trauma and have to like overcome that, which has deteriorated my self-image over the years. Like, what difference is there between it's how you understand it and how you're able to like move forward with that and everything. So I mean, it's like anything else. I wonder if just like the way that Big Joel like thinks and processes things, it's kind of difficult for him to wrap his head around this concept, because it is very much a like, it's very much a symbolic thing. It's not meant to be like a real like philosophical thing. It's a and I love philosophy too, but it's a psychological thing. I love philosophy and psychology and all that stuff, but like it's just understanding how you work, and it's giving terms to understand how you work, because that helps you. Like it's good. It helps you simplify things. People talk about where you know oh, I think it was I heard of this person who, I think it was Dan from Game Grumps, where he talked about how for a long time he was just like really sad, and he didn't want to confront the possibility that he might have depression. He thought it would have been horrible when he was when he realized if he'd be diagnosed with it. And when he went to the doctors, and they or the psychiatrist, and they did diagnose him with depression, what he realized was, this put a name on it. Now I understand it. Now I don't feel so different and odd. And that's the whole point of this, is you understand that, hey, there's actually like reasons as to why I feel this way, why this happens. Like, I'm not so different, I'm not so weird. It's just there's reasons for why this is the way it is. So I mean, it's a very, I think it's incredibly important. I think it's very good to understand yourself, and if you can understand yourself on this level, I think you can be a much better romantic partner. And honestly, a better friend too, if you can understand your own love languages, and how to communicate that with your friends as well, and communicate with their love languages. Because again, it's not just romantic, but like any relationship, friends, family, everything.
Chapman talking about when he talks about love languages. I want you to imagine that you're getting married. The priest recites the oaths, does whatever priests do, and then says his famous line, "If anyone objects to this marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace." The room is silent for a second, but then Shakespeare, you invited Shakespeare to your wedding, stands up and says, "Let me not, to the marriage of true minds, admit impediments." We are already off to a super weird start here, right? For one, who asked? Like, if William doesn't have anything to say about your marriage, then why did he stand up? The lack of impediments is usually not a reason to say something. What's more, that word there, admit, is extremely suspect. What do you mean, William? Do you have something on your mind that you're not telling us about? Are there impediments that you could admit? But okay, Shakespeare says he's not going to say anything. He's emphatically not objecting to your marriage, so let's get on with it. But then, he just kind of keeps going. Just to be clear, William says, bad things can happen. For example, there's alterations that could alter you, there are removers that could remove, but love...
But this isn't an objection. Nobody would say this stuff as an objection. This would be a really weird toast, but nobody would say this as an objection.
He says, doesn't work that way. Okay, now you're getting worried. Shakespeare is correct, after all, about alterations and removers, and it's not entirely clear to you why he thinks they couldn't affect your love. And you begin to wonder if you can even trust this guy. I mean, he told you that he wasn't going to admit impediments, but it looks like he's doing just that. It's really odd, but okay. He says your love will last, so great, mazel tov. But he keeps going. Here's the thing, he says. You're both gonna die. Like, don't get me wrong, you will bend with time's bending sickle. You will be removed, but thankfully, love will not. Now you're starting to wonder, what is this man even talking about? You're getting married right now. This is your love he's supposed to be talking about, but suddenly you feel so distant from what he's saying. You won't last, but your love will? Doesn't seem like that great of a deal. Just one more thing, he says. Shakespeare is very much like Columbo. If I'm proven wrong about any of this, nobody's ever loved anybody. That is my parting thought as William Shakespeare. Okay, you think. Now this guy is just starting to speak gibberish. Like, he says, if I'm proven wrong, but what does that mean? How could you possibly prove him wrong about this? To be clear, he's provided zero evidence for any of his beliefs. He seems to just take it as given that love does not admit impediments, but now he's like, if you can show me with rigorous logic that the thing I just made up is wrong, well, that would be pretty interesting. And even if you could magically generate this proof for Shakespeare, it wouldn't change his beliefs at all. He says, if I'm wrong, no man's ever loved, but see, that's not how being proven wrong works. His entire point was that love doesn't alter where alteration finds. And if that's not true, it would mean that lots of people have loved, and loved with alterations. This is just Shakespeare saying, if I'm wrong, I'm right, using fancy language to make his argument look invincible. This poem does not resolve in some beautiful, meaningful message. It does not affirm anything. No, it is in crisis. Shakespeare wants to produce this argument, this unimpeachable logic, but he can't. Of course he can't. In the introduction of his 5 Love Languages book, Chapman tries to make an argument establishing when love is not love.
So, does he disagree then with Shakespeare? Because I mean, I disagree with Shakespeare's quote, but like, I kind of don't. I don't really get what Joel was. Okay, moving on.
As he claims, with the help of some psychologists, the beginning of your relationship, when you are entirely enamored with your partner, what he calls the in-love experience, is not the real thing, and that's for 3 reasons. Unlike true love, the in-love experience is not a choice we make, an act of our will. Rather, it just happens. We can't control it. Second, the in-love experience is effortless. It's easy, pure instinct. It doesn't demand anything from us. Third, the in-love experience isn't always good for us, and doesn't revolve around improving ourselves or our newfound partners.
Right, so again, infatuation, limerence, yeah, this is what I was talking about.
So, how do we feel about the case Chapman's making? Well, I for one think it's very silly. For one, I don't think he or the psychologists he cites have some kind of particular license for policing words we all happily use use every day. The very idea that some researcher or minister can define people out of love is the height of arrogance, and I don't trust anyone who thinks they can make such a claim. What's more, I just don't agree with Chapman here. Why would I accept that love had to be some conscious, effortful act? When did I choose to love my mother, my friends, my dog? Are these all illegitimate, or is there some special carve-out he's making for romantic relationships for no apparent reason? No.
You do choose to love. When you have an issue with somebody that you care about, and you, especially if it's like really egregious, you have some kind of, not like a huge falling out where you're like you're not on speaking terms, but you have an issue. But man, you don't actually know. We're gonna use that as an example. You have a falling out with a friend. You have you're like, they did something that really hurt you, and you're saying, we're gonna move past this. Not we're gonna move, like, well, sure, we're gonna move past this. That's choosing to love, and that's an extreme example. But a smaller example is even like, dude, like reaching out to your friends, your loved ones. That's choosing to love them. Love is not just feeling like, oh, I feel so in love for them. I feel so in love. It's like, no, love is like sending that text asking how they're doing, making those plans so you guys can meet up, putting down your phone so you can actually pay attention to them, standing up for them if somebody's talking bad about them, whether they're around or not, being faithful to them, all of these different things. Like, you choose to love with everything that you do that involves them in some way, shape, or form. Wanting to discuss an important business proposition with your partner before making the decision. Like, oh, you can do this incredible job, but you're going to have to move across the country. Well, let me discuss that with my wife, my girlfriend, my husband, my whatever partner it is. Let me discuss it with them first. And some people will kind of like clown on that, and they'll be like, oh, you gotta ask. Well, yeah, if you're in a partnership, you should consult your partner about those kind of things. Like, that is what choosing to love look like. Not choosing to love is giving into the temptation of things like infidelity, or talking bad about your partner behind their back, or just thinking ill of them in general, like all these different things. So yeah, you choose to love every day. When your dog does something that you don't like, and I don't mean to compare relationships to dogs, but Joel brought up his dog, so I will. I'll answer that. When your dog, like, I don't know, shits on the floor and you got to clean it up, you are choosing to love them by cleaning up after them, not throwing them out or getting rid of them immediately. Like, every time you choose to maintain or foster a relationship, you are choosing to love that person. And again, it's not always romantic, but it is always a form of love.
I don't think I have some ultimate control over the people I love, and that does include romantic love. What I find special about this argument, though, isn't so much that I disagree with—
No. You don't have control over the people you love. You have control over yourself. That's the important thing. You will never control how somebody else feels about you, but you can control how you feel about them. Well, actually, you can't control how you feel about them, but you can control how you act toward them. A form of love that might be difficult, especially for somebody like me, would be giving space. I hate when, like, I'm one of those people, a lot of guys are like this, where we want to fix things, right? I'm sure you've heard of, like, men think everything is a nail, and sometimes a woman just wants the man to, like, acknowledge the nail. Something like that is how it goes. It's a very common thing with men and women where, like, a woman will just want to vent about the issue because she knows what the issue is, and she just wants someone to, like, listen and understand. And the guy's like, no, we need to deal with that right now. And I'm very much that way, where, like, when somebody brings an issue to me, they're no matter what the type of relationship it is, I'm somebody who, like, I want to fix it, because I want them to be, better and happy and all that stuff. But they just want to talk about it. And like, I'm like that too. There are times where I just want to talk about stuff. There are times everybody just wants to talk about and vent about something, right? Rather than be given actual advice. But so understanding that idea of, like, or sometimes, you want to talk to somebody and they're like, I just need space right now. An example, it could even be like I said, a friend, a coworker. If you're still in school, it could be somebody who, like, a classmate or something where, I've had this a lot where I remember when I was in school, I would have people, friends or otherwise, where like they'd be in a bad mood, and I'd want to cheer them up and talk to them and make them feel better, and talking about what's going on and all that stuff. The best way, in my experience and understanding, to actually handle those situations is basically you can offer and let somebody know, hey, I'm here for you if you need me. But if they want to be left alone, if they just want space, they will, like, you need to respect that and honor that and give them their space, because in that instance, while it might not feel like it to you, like you feel like, oh, I'm not doing anything for them, giving them that space is showing them that love and respect that they need in that moment. So again, like these love languages and stuff, they can all manifest and work in different ways.
it, but that it leads us into a kind of existential abyss. Like, if this so-called falling in love experience isn't that deep or valuable, if it should not even be termed love, then what makes his version of love so special? Why is this intentional, work-intensive relationship that Chapman likes important? He goes on in this section to write the following. Does that mean that having been tricked into marriage by the illusion of being in love, we are now faced with two options? One, we are destined to a life of misery with our spouse, or two, we must jump ship and try again? And it's like, at this point, who honestly cares what happens with the marriage? If we are all just duped into our relationships by arbitrary forces that mean nothing about us or the people we are with, then it's hard to see why preserving those fraudulent relationships matters.
No, I don't think that that's fair either. I don't think that, no, because I think it's important to understand that all relationships, okay, the way I view relationships, all of them, is that eventually they will come to an end. And when that time comes, you should have the ability to find a new relationship should you want it. Now, that doesn't mean that all relationships will come to an end in a bad way or anything like that. But like eventually, obviously, if nothing else, well, death is going to tear us apart. But whatever it may be, changes in life will cause change, and you don't want to be in a situation where you hold on so much to somebody that even though it's no longer a good relationship, because you love each other and you want to make it work, that you have to. However, having the understanding of love languages can be a tool to not go that route, but to be able to maintain the relationship should that be what you want to do. It's complicated because, like, you'll hear boomers a lot will talk about this, where they'll say like, oh, everybody just wants to like jump out of relationships these days, and there's some validity to that, right? Where people aren't willing, a lot of younger people aren't willing to, we're not willing to like stick out relationships. There is validity to that, but there's also validity to the idea that you don't want to just stick around in something that isn't healthy for you, or even then isn't satisfying, all those different things. So it's like anything else, where like you have to find a balance and kind of figure out like, okay, well, what am I willing to work on, what are you willing to work on with me, what can we handle, and if we get to a point where we're just like we're incompatible or something, then that's just what it is. So um it's not that, like if a relationship ends then it was never valid in the first place, but it's more that be able to know and to leave. Well, I mean, I don't think Gary would advise leaving a relationship, because I think that's very like anti, probably his brand of Christianity, but be able to leave a relationship should you see that it's no longer bearing fruit for either of you, or as a lot of people will talk about it, getting a return on their investment. And people get mad about that, where they're like, oh, people talk about relationships where they're transactional. Yes, all relationships are transactional in some way, shape, or form. If 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 somebody stops giving you the things that made you desire the relationship you have with them, whether that be friendship, romantic, sexual, business partner, whatever it might be, then yeah, that relationship's going to come to an end. Yes, relationships are transactional, but not in, that doesn't mean that they're not valid or worthy or anything. And if a relationship ends, that doesn't mean it was never good. It just means it's run its course.
other words, if the feelings we have for each other, the intensity of our connections, and the joy and intimacy they bring us are not enough to be called beautiful, enough to be called love, then why call anything love? What difference does any of this make? Through his strange logic, Chapman has dug himself into a void of meaninglessness. And here, we can come back to the love languages, because we can almost read them as a desperate bid to claw that meaning back. What if love was more than love? What if there were official ways it was spoken, and almost all of us liked one way the most? What if doing a nice thing for your partner wasn't just nice, but an essential piece of some grand design, an eternal code that we can access? I asked before, what is the difference between saying you're sad your partner didn't get you a gift, and saying your love language is gift giving, so you're sad they didn't get you a gift? And the answer, I think, is that everyone
it's the difference between understanding I'm sad all the time and I don't know why versus, oh, I actually have depression. It's just understanding how your mind works and processes things. It's a good thing to do.
Presents. Everyone feels loved when they get one. People during the in-love illusion celebrate birthdays and buy each other nice stuff. So there must be more to it. Something that tells us we matter, that tells us our relationship
Because the point is, if you take, again, somebody like me who gift giving is my least, I really don't care that much. A kind word is unironically going to mean a hell of a lot more than gift giving. Or here's another way to put it, right? A meaningful, like a written letter or recorded, I don't know, song or something, and or a trip to some like concert, comedy show, cruise, whatever, some event together means a lot more to me than, I don't know, I want a PS5 right now, so it's like, oh, I got you a new PS5. Like, that's great, but that doesn't tell me anything about us. Like, I'm not somebody who I think, like every item I have, I'm like, oh, I got this from that person and that. Like, I don't know, it's all just stuff to me. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't want to lose it, you know what I mean? But it's not how I feel loved, if that makes sense. It's nice, but it's like, it's certainly not what I'm like looking for in a partner. You know what I mean? Like, I've talked about this before. I've alluded to the fact that I have a list of the qualities I want in a long-term partner, and there's nothing about gift giving there at all. Nothing at all. Like, I do not care.
Is meaningful, that this isn't all just empty. So why not produce some psychological sounding jargon? Why not invent a language? A few months ago, Nerdwriter, a video essayist who kind of pioneered the genre, made a video about Sonnet 116. The video is, in general, really quite good. He makes a lot of insightful points about the poem and comes to roughly the same conclusion that I did here.
We're hearing a speaker in a void, trying to convince himself that love is somehow different than every other thing in the ephemeral universe, and not succeeding.
What interests me about the video, though, is the final 30 seconds. After he finishes his interpretation of Shakespeare, Nerdwriter says this.
This doesn't mean that true love, the marriage of true minds, is any less real or any less beautiful. It's the opposite, in fact, something Shakespeare knew very well. Beauty belongs to what's impermanent, and we cherish the most the things we can lose.
There's a lot to unpack here in these concluding thoughts, but to start, I think I should say that I disagree with Nerdwriter here. Like, I disagree with him about love. I don't think our relationships are any more beautiful because they end. Sure, he's correct that beauty belongs to the impermanent and that we cherish most the things we can lose, but that's pretty vacuous, isn't it? We also hate the things most that we can lose. We're apathetic most about the things we can lose, because, you know, we're gonna lose everything. We're all gonna fucking die. Here's the thing.
I think, So what it feels like, what I think Joel is getting at here is the difference between, and I don't know if he's going to touch on it specifically, but the difference between passive nihilism and active nihilism. Passive nihilism is more of a pessimistic, like, oh, nothing matters, like, you know, that's what people tend to think of when they think of a nihilist. But an active nihilist is somebody who says, nothing really matters, but that's okay, because I get to make things the way that I want them to be. I get to make my life the way that I want it to be. I get to make things about like my life and people and all this stuff the way that I want them to be. And that's incredible. We get to figure all this shit out on our own because none of it actually matters. So we get to figure it out, like, as humans. And that's incredible. That's awesome. I would say that's more what I am. This is something that I grappled a lot with when I was deconstructing my faith. And I ultimately came out the other end of no longer believing in a religious deity. However, something that I grappled with a lot was this idea that, like, well, if nothing matters, then, like, if there is no God, then nothing matters. If there is no life after death, if things end, then nothing matters. Then what's the point? And that's a very, like, sad way of looking at things. I really like the way that Ricky Gervais has talked about it, where it's like, you know, if you watched a movie, were you sad because it was over? You know, was it not worth watching? When you eat a thing of food, is it not worth watching? Or sorry, not worth eating because it's gone? Is something no longer valuable just because it's gone? Are we apathetic about everything that we know we're going to eventually lose? Your favorite car, people tend to get new cars every like 10 to 15, maybe 20 years. Is the time that you've had with it and the joy that you've had driving it and all those different things, does it not matter because you're going to eventually have to get a new car? You know what I mean? Like, and people get mad when relationships are compared to cars and things of that nature. But the reality is, the reason that comparison is so often made is because it's an easy one to understand, for everybody to kind of get on board with and understand that how cars work and all those different things. So yeah, but yeah, I don't agree with this idea that like if it has an end, then it's meaningless. I think that's a very sad way of viewing the world and yourself, even, because like we're all gonna end someday, like, yeah.
I can't speak to the perspective of an immortal. I can't say what it would be like if we had forever to love and be loved, but either can Nerdwriter. And in the meantime, when I think about the people I love, it is not the ending that makes me happy, that gives me value. No, I think the love itself is enough, that it is meaningful in and
Yeah, it's about the journey, not the destination. But that's he's not saying the end is what makes it valuable. He's saying the fact that it ends gives it more value.
of itself. And that it is true, that everything good must end is a sad thing to me, a tragedy. That might sound cynical, like I'm being a downer, but I disagree.
I wouldn't say it's it's just the way it is. It's not a tragedy, it's how it is. This video is going to come to an end, and you can watch another video, but this video, I mean, not just my video, but even Joel's video, if you like Joel, you like his content, this Joel right here in this video does not exist outside of this video. You watch another Joel video, he's going to talk about something else. He's going to be something different. You're not going to have this same experience as you were having with this video. Like, that's true with everything. Everything comes to an end. Okay, so here's... No, I'll save that for something more important.
Agree. To believe truly that life is beautiful and worthwhile is to accept that it will be sad when the jig is up. It's not perfect, but that's...
It doesn't have to be... Okay, you know what? Fuck it. I am going to use it as an example. Unironically, something that legitimately helped me with my existential dread when I was confronting my faith and having this feeling of like, well, if the world comes to an end, if my life and everything comes to an end, then it's not worth it. There is a scene, and I am not kidding. I am not kidding when I say that this, unironically, thinking about it again, helped me understand the concept of life having an end, but still being valuable. There is a scene, YouTube is being weird here. Okay. So there, you know what? We'll just do the whole thing. Okay, so to give some context here. This is a scene from the video game Sonic and the Black Knight. Stay with me. The main character, the villain, the twist villain even, is sad that the world comes to an end. So what she does is she tries to basically take dark magic to make everybody live eternally. Now, they live eternally, but it's done in a very dark, sinister way. Everyone kind of turns into like these demons of some sort. And so when you finish the game, you beat the final boss, and Sonic has a final conversation with the character of Merlina, which is, yes, like Merlin. It's all based on the King Arthur stuff. Anyway, this blew my mind. Well, it didn't really blow my mind when I was a kid, but when I thought about it more and more as I grew up, this is extremely profound. Especially, this is the most profound Sonic's ever been, by the way. I get like chills with this, unironically. Like, this is, just check this out.
Merlina, every world has its end. I know that's kind of sad, but that's why we gotta live life to the fullest in the time we have. At least, that's what I figure.
So, like, you have this moment here where...
Grandfather.
And she's remembering her grandfather who died as well. But you have this moment
That's what I figure.
where, you know, Sonic is giving Merlina this dead flower, which, you know, symbolizes, yes, this thing, like, or sorry, that's a new flower that's bloomed from a dead flower. You know, the idea that life goes on. There's meaning in beyond what exists now. I know that was a very, like, look, he's getting philosophical here about, like, death and that nothing's permanent and that all that stuff. So I had to share that because that scene, unironically, that quote of every world has its end. I know that's sad, but that's why we have to live life to the fullest in the time we have. That is like another one of my big philosophies. 100%. Like, yeah, we're all gonna die someday, and like that was extremely terrifying to me for a long time, especially as I was deconstructing my faith. And I think one of the big reasons I held on to Christianity for as long as I did, and I think a reason a lot of people hold on to religion, is because it's terrifying to think that we're gonna die someday. This is it. This is the end. And when the lights go out, there's nothing else. But the idea that, yeah, but that's so empowering because that means we have all this time in the world to just live life and enjoy it and make it better for ourselves and for other people. And that's incredibly, incredibly powerful, incredibly inspiring. So I had to go on that little tangent because I vehemently, not like angrily, but I very much disagree with this view, this idea that, well, an ending always has to be sad. Like, no, I don't agree with that.
That's the deal we get. But Nerdwriter isn't just saying something I disagree with, he is putting it in the mouth of Shakespeare. And to be honest, I just don't buy it. Shakespeare understood very well that love is more beautiful because we lose it.
Okay, Joel, the thing is, this is a poem. Art, especially poems and music, are open to interpretation. You can have 10 different people listen to the same song or read the same poem, and they can all come away with different meanings. That's part of what makes music so incredible. And it's also why you'll have people who will like hear the meaning of a song, like what the artist meant by it, and they're like, oh, well, that's not what I thought it meant. Like, you know, or you'll have people very confused about what somebody's like, I don't know, political, philosophical, whatever beliefs are, and they think like, oh, but like in your songs or whatever, it's like, yeah, that's not, where did you get that idea, you know?
Okay, maybe you're right from some general perspective, but looking at this poem, it doesn't seem like that's the case at all. Because everything we, myself and Nerdwriter, have said thus far really makes it look like Shakespeare is freaking out. That he wants to make this argument, construct this proof for the permanence of love, but just can't quite do it. It is a deeply unsettling poem, and it's hard to imagine not seeing it that way. In the final line...
See, I don't think that. I don't think that it's like sad. I think that, and I think Nerdwriter hit on it very well there, is that it's not sad, but rather it is am I good? Okay. It's not sad, but rather it's this idea of like, this is the way that it is, and if I'm wrong about this, then no one's ever loved. And it's not this idea that, so the takeaway is no one has ever loved. The takeaway, I feel, is that's insane. Of course people have loved. So like this understanding of love doesn't make sense. Love is something more than this. I feel like but you know, but this is art. It's all open to interpretation. So it's like, technically, Joel, Nerdwriter, and myself are all correct here because art, like, that's how art is. It's open to interpretation.
of Shakespeare's sonnet, he writes that if he's wrong, he's never written a word. And through these lines, we come to understand something. There is a monster behind this poem. And if it can remove the most special thing that has ever happened, if it can remove love, then why can't it remove everything else? The people we know, the ground on which we walk. To admit this monster into the work is so unthinkable, so cosmically horrifying, that his presence cannot be named. If we were to name it, Shakespeare couldn't write a word, and the poem would cease to exist. If we were to name it, the world itself would be as good as over, because it would have no meaning. And in his own way, Nerdwriter plays along. There's nothing scary here, he says. There is no ghost haunting this poem. The sonnet is kind of like a joke. It's mocking anyone who would care about something as trivial as the permanence of love and the death.
I don't think it's a joke. I think it's wrestling with that existential dread, in this case with love, and this idea that, like, yes, it's going to come to an end, it's going to change, but like it's still beautiful in the time that it is. Again, it's the difference between what we're seeing here, truthfully, is the difference between like worldviews and life views. We're seeing a difference between how people view the world, how they look at life, because we're seeing that I'm seeing here that Joel is clearly, or he seems to me at least, to be more of a not a passive nihilist, but he thinks that if nihilism is true, so to speak, then it has to be negative. Whereas I would say Nerdwriter and myself seem to be taking more of a active nihilist view with this mentality, where he's essentially saying, like, yeah, like things change, this will all end, but it's beautiful. It's still beautiful in the time that it is.
Of everything. Shakespeare knows that all love will end, and he's fine with that. To say anything else would be to imply that Shakespeare might have something he was worried about, that maybe we too have something to be worried about. It would name the monster, and we can't have that. Shakespeare takes us to the edge of doom and stares into it for a moment, and then he needs to look back. And I think it's beautiful somehow that so many years later, watching some video on YouTube or reading some book about love, that we need to look back too.
So alright, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. This story's at the end of the World Series it's weird, man. I'm craving making normal videos again. I hope you too want to watch some normal videos, because that's what I'm in the business of making, hopefully soon. At any rate, I have a Patreon you can go to where I make bonus videos every month. In a couple days, I'll have a video out about the Elon Musk episode of The Simpsons that I think is pretty cool. And also, I just wanted to say that in addition to Big Joel, I have another YouTube channel called Little Joel, where I've been making videos basically every single day. I haven't talked about it yet on the channel, like talking to you here. So, if you want to go follow that, do it. I like doing it. I like making them. Now it's time for my Patreon question of the video.
Oh, wait.
Kathleen Paceman asks, what is your favorite holiday dessert? I am a holiday dessert skeptic. I think that generally desserts are better unholidayed. However, I do like a nice...
Desserts are better on holiday. I don't know if I have a favorite holiday dessert. Pumpkin pie, I guess?
Pecan pie. Thank you so much.
Oh, pecan pie, okay.
For the question.
Not pecan. Just...
Bye. Subscribe to my YouTube channel.
Alright, I just wanted to let that last bit play so he could, I don't know, say anything he might want to say. I'm interested as well, because he did a follow-up on this. Did I punch down on the love languages? So this is on his little Joel channel that he just mentioned. I haven't seen this one at all, so I'm curious as to where this goes, and then I'll give my final thoughts on the whole thing in general here.
So just yesterday, I made a video on my actual channel on Big Joel about Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages, and I was pretty critical of it. Obviously, you can go watch that if you want to, but today, right now, I just want to read you a comment that I got on that video that I thought was a bit interesting. So let's get into it. Isn't this punching down a little bit? Like, yes, obviously healthy relationships are going to use all of these languages to communicate, but the concept isn't for people in healthy relationships. It's for people who don't know how to talk to their partners. So I find this comment just extremely interesting, and that's for a few reasons. First, obviously the thing that caught my eye about it was that phrase, punching down. Isn't it punching down what I do in my video? I don't think it's really possible to punch down on advice that somebody gives. Like, the advice that Gary's giving in the book isn't a person. It's not like a person who I can make feel bad. It's a book. So I don't think I punch down on the book, on the concept of the love languages. I don't think I'm gonna stigmatize the love languages. But that being said, I actually find other aspects of this comment a bit more interesting, particularly this bit, where the person says that people in healthy relationships are obviously going to use all of these languages to communicate. I find this to be really interesting because it actually strenuously disagrees with Gary Chapman's analysis, and it doesn't even seem aware of that. No, the 5 love languages says, we are not always engaging in these 5 love languages. They are not interrelated. You don't do all of them in a healthy relationship.
I think you do. I think that the way Joel has viewed this, I think, is just incorrect. I don't think that I don't think that a healthy way of looking at the love languages is this, like, absolutist, like one or the other, all or nothing kind of thing. I think it's more of you're going to use different parts of these in different, like, moments, and it's good to know how you communicate in these instances and how your partner communicates in these instances and things of that nature.
The vast majority of people, they care about one particular love language the most, and all of the other love languages massively less. That's what the book says. For some of them,
I do agree. If that is so I will say, if that is the message and that is the takeaway that a lot of people have, I would disagree with that. But I also don't think that that's how the concept of love languages actually work. Now, again, to be fair, I didn't read the book. I don't read, so I don't know. But yeah.
In fact, the love languages they don't care about are so unimportant that learning about them is as difficult as learning Chinese. The book is absolutely not saying, if you're having problems in your relationship, try starting with one of these love languages and move from there. It actually is suggesting a psychological theory about love, and that is what I'm responding to. One last little bit of this comment that I found noteworthy is where they say that the book is for people who don't know how to talk to their partners. So I think this is incorrect in a kind of...
I think that's incorrect too, because I think it's more that this is a tool to help people who are struggling to communicate with their partners, to communicate better, and to help people who are already communicating well to continue communicating well and understand why they're communicating well in the first place and how they can keep up that good communication. Because the thing is, right, here's the issue. People always say, communication is key. Communication is key. You got to communicate. And you're right. You do have to communicate in all relationships. But how do you communicate? That's the important part. It's not just enough to communicate. You have to communicate in the right way for your partner and vice versa. That's what the point of the love languages is it's not just, it's like, okay, you want to communicate? Fantastic, that's great. How are you going to communicate? It's the difference between somebody saying like, man, I want to eat better, or I want to work out, or whatever the case. Okay, great. What are you going to do? I don't know. And it's the difference between that versus having an actual plan. Like, that's the point of the love language. It's to help you understand the concept better.
Of nuanced way. The 5 love languages isn't actually for people who don't know how to talk to their partners. It's for people in struggling marriages. And Gary Chapman suggests that the reason why they are in struggling marriages is almost always because of communication issues, and that those communication issues can be solved by attuning to their partner's love language.
I would agree with that.
See, that's another problem with the book, right? It paints relationships in this extremely broad, overly ambitious brush. It gives itself far too much credit in analyzing the problems that people have, and it gives them a one-size-fits-all advice that oftentimes probably doesn't make much sense. So obviously,
I don't agree that it's one-size-fits-all. I think that it's just a way to understand how you work and how your partner works and how you can communicate in a way that each other understands better. Hence why it's called a language, because that's what language is, communicating information in a way that others understand.
This comment doesn't matter all that much. It's not that big of a deal, but I just find it striking how easily we find ourselves sort of reading past the ideas that people say in the name of kind of defending them. There is plausibly a version of Gary Chapman's love languages that makes more sense, that is better. But that's not the one we got. That's not the book that was written. That is not the best-selling book about pop psychology that we got. Chapman is doing something. He wants you to believe something about yourself and other people, and it's important, fundamentally important, I think, to evaluate what he's saying and not be afraid of some theoretical, abstract harm you're doing to some failing couple. That couple's gonna do what they're gonna do. They're gonna find value wherever they're gonna find value. It's really not my business. It's okay for them to feel any way they want to. But I'm talking about the book. I'm talking about the book written by a guy. So have a nice day. Hey, everybody.
Fair enough. Yeah, I don't know. The way I see it, I think the concept of love languages and using them in a broader way to understand yourself and your partner and how you communicate, I think that's great. I think just like with anything else, it should be taken with a grain of salt and understood that there's room for nuance and variation and all that good stuff. But it's also good to have kind of an understanding and a plan, because it's not like you have to do this. It's just, this is a tool. This is a way that you can understand yourself and how you communicate and receive love. It just helps you understand things. It's just a helpful tool at the end of the day. But no, I think the concept is very good. I think I was not expecting that philosophical turn that we went there. That was incredible to me. I got Sonic and the Black Knight, and how he unironically, and that game unironically, helped shape my philosophy and get over some existential dread and stuff. So that's interesting that we went there as well. But whatever. Yeah, no, I get where Joel is getting at, but I very much disagree, and I think that again, that philosophical part of believing that if things end, then they had no meaning in the first place, I think that's just a very pessimistic way to view life, and I think it generally puts you in a very sad framework. I know for myself, it's put me in a very, very much a mindset of, I have to make this work. I have to make, whether it be a relationship, a job, a career path, whatever the case. Like I have to make this work because this is like what I'm destined for and all this stuff. Like that's not healthy. But yeah, you know, like anything else, this is a tool. 5 love languages, like it's a tool to understand. It doesn't mean you're always, like in my case, I'm always going to want words of affirmation. Like that's always what I need all the time. No, sometimes I will need someone to like, the way for my partner to like show me love would be, or a friend or whatever to show me love would be reaching out and doing something for me. Or like, that's the way that I've done it too. You know what I mean? So, you know, yeah, but, yeah, I mean, like I said, I disagree with Joel on those like kind of fundamental things, but overall, no hate, you know, no hate for the guy. I don't think like, oh, he's like, this is harmful, like nothing like that. Just we disagree. I think that was interesting that you know, we got to see, you know, just different takes on a simple concept, a concept that again I think is actually very beneficial, just used in the right way. So yeah. Anyway, as always, these are just my thoughts. Let me know what yours are in the comments down below. Follow me on social media for more. Links in the description. Subscribe and ring the bell to stay up to date. Leave a like if you like. And if not, I hope you find something to do like. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Peace and love.